first agendum for today, and we're going to talk about the steps in leading effective meeting. So allow me to share with you a framework how we can facilitate meeting effectively. So before I share with you the framework, just want to share with you what are the common problems in terms of or when we are facilitating a meeting. So I'm sure you can all relate because you have participated in a lot of sessions in the past. And the first, you may type yes if you have experienced it, or you may type me if you have experienced it, if you have participated in in an online training program that is boring. Can you type me if you have experienced it? Yeah, I'm sure a lot of us have experienced it. And you know what? According to research, I'm going to share with you, and this is something that you have to know, that our attention to detail is, or our attention to detail will start to deteriorate after the first 30 minutes. So, in as much as possible, we have to be efficient in terms of facilitating meeting because our attention to detail will start to deteriorate after the first 30 minutes. So we may be very attentive in the first 30 minutes, but after 30 minutes, our attention to detail will start to deteriorate. So we have to be efficient in terms of managing meeting. But just want to make sure that you see my screen. I'm projecting now the problem with most meeting that is boring. Do you see that? Yes? Okay, good. Very good. So the first problem in terms of facilitating meeting, just like because you see, I've also experienced this as I'm finishing my doctorate program now in St. Paul University here in the Philippines. I've experienced it a lot. I've experienced a lot of training programs that's kind of boring. The facilitator is not kind of expensive, but I mean, not kind of engaging. So, in as much as possible, we have to be as engaging as possible. Okay. And then secondly, I've also participated in a session that is time wasting. So meaning, maybe because the facilitator doesn't have that framework or the agenda. So we are kind of in the limbo of darkness. So it's kind of for us, we may think it's time wasting. And lastly, I'm not sure if you've participated in a session that doesn't really have that sense of direction. And that's why when you are facilitating a meeting, just like what we're doing right now, you always jumpstart your session with the objectives. So what do you want to achieve in the entirety of the session? So I'm sure at many points when you have participated in a webinar session, I'm sure you've experienced a meeting that is boring, time wasting, and a meeting that doesn't really have that sense of direction, right? Yes? Do you agree? Are you with me? Hello? Okay, good. Very good. I just want to make sure that you're with me. So I want you to lend me your ears in the next 40 minutes as I share with you a framework that you can use how to lead effective meetings. So I'm going to share with you 4 steps how you can facilitate effective meetings. So number 1 is you have to set the stage. So the first thing that we have to do would be to set the stage, and we need to establish the agenda of the meeting as well as set the meeting logistics. And these are usually sent to the participants before the actual meeting. So what do we have to send to the participants? When you will be facilitating a meeting, you have to send ahead of time what are the agenda. So the agenda would detail what the meeting is for and the specific topics or items that will be discussed in the meeting. In addition to the meeting agenda, you also have to include the meeting logistics. So the meeting logistics would include the basic information about the meeting as to the date, the time, the venue, the participants of the meeting, or you may use Outlook calendar invite to send a reminder to everyone. But before the meeting starts, you have to include or you have to send the agenda as well as the logistics. All right, so that's the first step. When you are facilitating a meeting, you have to set the stage. And after you set the stage, you proceed with providing structure. So this is the next step. And in this particular step, we ensure that during the actual meeting, we stick to our goal and we accomplish what we have set out to do in the meeting. So what do? We jumpstart the session with an opening. So how do we do this? We start with greeting. We start with introduction. Or you may opt to also jumpstart your session with icebreaker. And in as much as I'd like to squeeze that in, but due to the limited time and due to time constraint, we cannot do that. We cannot squeeze an icebreaker. But if you have enough or ample time, you can squeeze in or you can jumpstart your session with icebreakers. Or you may review previous minutes of the meeting. You may review the agenda of for the current meeting and also setting of roles. We'll talk about the various roles later on because there is a facilitator of the meeting and stuff like that. So we'll talk about that shortly. But during the meeting, you have to start with the opening. And after that comes the discussion proper. So in this particular phase, you ensure participation of everyone is involved. And that's why engagement is very important, most especially that this is done in a webinar session. But normally, when I'm facilitating a webinar session, I always ask my participants to switch on their webcams. Can we do that? Can you switch on your camera? I'm seeing Goldie Kumari. What about the others? Can you switch your cameras on? Thank you. I'm seeing Ganesh. I'm seeing Prasad. And everyone, because I want to know what you're doing right now. I want to make sure that everyone's listening. All right. Piyush, Anuja. And you know what? I have a lot of Indian friends here in Dumaguete. There are a lot of Indian... I have a lot of friends who love playing badminton here. Do you play badminton too? Yeah, I love playing badminton. All right, looking great, looking great. Thank you. And you may switch your camera on, just don't turn it off so I can also see what you're doing. After all, it's just, how many minutes? I think that's around 45 minutes. All right, let's continue. So after the discussion proper, you have to, of course, conclude, right? So we move on to conclusion. In this particular phase, you will review the action items, and of course, you have to send the minutes of the meeting. Now, I have a question for everyone, and you can type it. How many hours should we be sending the minutes of the meeting? One hour or 1 hour? That's so quick, huh? 45 hours? Okay. 2 hours? 40 minutes? 40 to 50 minutes, 2 hours, 45 minutes. I'm still looking for the right answer. 2 hours. No, not yet. I haven't seen the right answer yet. 1 hour, 45 minutes before a day. 30 minutes, 30 minutes. 1.5 hours, 40 minutes. Nope. $55 minutes? No. Actually, minutes of the meeting or the MOM should be sent within 24 hours. So that's 24 hours or within the day. Are we cool? So we don't want to put too much pressure, especially to the minutes taker. We'll give him or her ample time to do the minutes of the meeting, but the minutes of the meeting should be sent within 24 hours. Is that clear? Yes? Type yes, please. All right, thank you so much. Now let's move on to step number 3. So step number 1 is we have to set the stage. Step number 2, we have to provide structure. Now, the challenge in terms of facilitating meeting comes in step number 3. Because in step number 3, we have to overcome challenges. So this is the next step that throughout the duration of the meeting, everyone is involved and everyone is focused in the meeting. And some of the common behavioral challenges that most leaders would encounter and should overcome in a meeting would include number 1. I'm sure you would agree with me. If you have participated in a meeting, there is always a dominator. Yes? There is always a dominator. So what does a dominator do? These folks take over the conversation. They share at length. They have an opinion about every topic. And they take up valuable time. They are those who are aggressive by nature. Have you experienced that? Type me if you've experienced participating in a meeting with dominators. There are a lot, actually. We don't want to create that culture of being aggressive, but we want to create a culture that is in the middle ground between being passive and being aggressive. Do you know what's in the middle ground of being passive and aggressive? You have any idea what's in the middle ground between being passive and being aggressive? So we want to create a culture that is not aggressive, that is not passive, but we want to create a culture that is assertive. Assertive or assertiveness is in the middle ground between being passive. Being passive means being a doormat or being aggressive, right? So we want you to be at the center of being passive or being aggressive, and that is being assertive. Assertiveness is being able to express your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, but you also have the thoughts, feelings, and so you care for the thoughts, feelings, and emotions of other people. So you care for your thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and at the same time you care for the thoughts, feelings, and emotions of another person. So we want to create that culture of being assertive. So we despise or we challenge dominators. We don't want, but whether we like it or we like it, we have to experience facilitating a meeting with dominators, and they truly exist. And then there's also another behavioral challenge that we call it naysayer. Have you heard of this word? Naysayer or nayser? Have you heard of it? Yes? Have you heard of naysayer? No. Okay, it's fine. Actually, a naysayer is someone who argues a lot. They argue every point. It doesn't matter if it's a big or a small point, but they love arguing. And most often than not, they argue with everyone. Have you experienced attending a meeting or even in a classroom with naysayer? A naysayer loves arguing. Okay. So you have not experienced it? Well, good for you. Often. All right. Okay. Let's move on. Excuse me. All right, let's move on to the next challenge. When you will be facilitating a meeting, you will also experience another behavioral challenge, and that is the silent but deadly. You know what they do? The silent but deadly say nothing at all. And you don't know whether it's because they are shy, or they have no opinion, they are daydreaming, or they're planning to be your worst nightmare. So but they exist. I don't know if they're thinking about something else. They may be thinking about their problems at home, or they may be thinking about, or they may be heartbroken at one point, but they just don't participate, or they may be thinking about how they can be your worst nightmare. So we have to overcome that as well. And then we also have the rabbit trailblazer. Have you heard of this? You know what? A rabbit cannot run in a straight line. No, a rabbit. A rabbit trailblazer normally has a lot of ideas, many of which are not relevant to the discussion, and they lead the team down a path or many paths that end you up further away from where you needed to be than before the meeting ever started. So they have that fundamental tendency to derail the discussion. So we already set the agenda, and then a rabbit trailblazer will do its best to derail and to discuss about something else, to derail the discussion. So those are the things that they do. So you have to overcome that challenge too. And as a facilitator, you have to ensure that you get back to the topic once you feel that the discussion has been derailed. Next is, from the rabbit trailblazer, we also have the multitasker. And that's why I asked you earlier to switch your cams on, because I want to see what you're doing. Because some are actually may not be attentively listening right now, I'm not sure. But there are what we consider the multitaskers. Now, what do they do? Multitaskers may be, or there are those, I mean, their eyes are on phones or on tablets or on various other devices, and they may appear busy but are actually not engaged in the conversation. So when you are facilitating a meeting, or in the future you will be facilitating a meeting, whether it is in a webinar platform or you're doing it ILT or instructor-led training, meaning you're doing it face-to-face, you have to overcome multitaskers. So when you're doing webinar session, it's best that you require your participants to switch their cameras on. Are we clear? Or if you're doing face-to-face, you have to ensure that they're not looking at their phones, their tablets, or any other devices. Okay, because multitaskers exist, whether we like it or not. So which of these, can you tell me, which of these behavioral challenges have you witnessed in some of the sessions that you've participated in the past? You can type it. Which of these behavioral challenges have you witnessed or have you experienced while you have participated in webinar sessions or face-to-face discussions in the past? All right, type away. Dominator. I agree. They're everywhere. And they always take over the conversation. I agree. Even here in the Philippines, we have a lot of dominators too. I think it's human nature. So every rabbit trailblazer according to Radhika. But most of you are telling me it's dominator. All right. What about multitasker? I'm sure some of you there are doing something else while we're doing this webinar session. Me too. I hate dominators. But whether we like it or not, we have to deal with these people. All right, let's move on. So this is the most challenging part when you are facilitating a meeting. So overcoming challenges because of the different behavioral challenges. But whether we like it or not, we have as facilitators, we have to overcome these challenges. And lastly, you have to track commitment and progress. So this is the last step. We need to ensure that whatever commitments were agreed in the past or during the meeting would become a reality through follow-up and updating of the MOM. So what do? We have to agree on follow-up dates, and then as what I've mentioned, you have to circulate the MOM or the minutes of the meeting within 24 hours after the meeting was adjourned. And lastly, you have to provide feedback, and lastly, you have to realign. So that is to track commitment and progress. But I want to stress out specifically in this particular slide is that you circulate the MOM within 24 hours after the meeting was adjourned. So going back to the 4 steps, you have to spot an effective discussion. What do? You have to set the stage, you have to provide structure, you have to overcome challenges, and lastly, you have to track commitments and progress. MOM means minutes of the meeting. Let me type it. That's minutes of the meeting. Yep, that is correct. Any questions so far? Any questions? Let me know if you have questions so we'll be able to answer some of your questions. Any questions? Let me know. All right, it looks like. All right, so let's continue. We have a few slides left. I want you to pay extra attention as we discuss about the problems, specifically when we are doing the webinar session. All right. So, we have questions here. How to overcome dominators? Very good question. So before we proceed with the problems in webinar, I'm gonna answer the question first. How to overcome dominators? What I normally do is to leverage on their strength. I can call their attention to discuss certain topic. And in that way, they've helped me in facilitating the meeting. So leverage on their strength. You can ask them to participate. You can ask for their insights. And you can ask them to discuss in front whatever you want them to discuss. But make sure as a facilitator that you are still on top of everything. All right? Okay, let's move on. What are the common problems when you are facilitating webinar? Number 1 is promoting the right channel and the right time. So much of the webinar's success comes down to the success of your promotion, and it's no wonder finding the right promotional mix is a top challenge. Now, according to survey, and this was done online, businesses found the most effective channels for webinar promotion to be, number 1, email is very effective, partner or co-marketing is also very effective, and the employee or personal networks. Those are effective. So those 3 are effective in terms of promoting webinar. So those 3 channels are effective. And the least effective channel includes search marketing, to include Facebook and Twitter. So our main takeaway is email is hands down the best channel for webinar promotion, and email typically makes up 73% of registration. So put email promotion at the top of your to-do list. But that's number 1. Another challenge would be promote or working through the technical issues. So as facilitator, you have to ensure that you will never experience technical glitches or technical haywires. So you have to start promotion 4 weeks before the webinar, and then um, and you have to know how to get through technical issues should they arise, and you have to make sure they know how to work the webinar controls. Now, according to one of the surveys done online, the top challenge when it comes to actually hosting the webinar is navigating the control panel and interacting with the panelists. So you have to anticipate for that. And in a lot of times, I have participated in a session with, especially if the facilitator is kind of old, meaning they are part of the baby boomer generation, they may be having challenges specifically with navigating or controlling the panels and the settings. So you have to anticipate for that. All right, is that clear? Next is next challenge is engaging the audience, especially if we're doing the webinar session. This is kind of challenging. Now, as what I've mentioned, our participants may be very attentive to details, especially in the first 30 minutes, but they may start losing their interest after 30 minutes. But just want to make sure to everyone that you're still with me. Can you type yes if you're still with me? All right, thank you so much. And yeah. So there is the need. So there is the need for brief diversion. We call it brief diversion. I'm gonna type it to put emphasis. So you see, brief diversion is very important, and it can dramatically impact the attention of your participants. So if you have a lot of time for the discussion, you have to ensure, you have to squeeze in icebreakers, or we call it brief diversion. It can dramatically affect, or it can dramatically influence your participants for them to be more engaged in the discussion. All right. So what we want to do, so the key to engaging your audience is not to talk at them. You have to talk with them, and you use the tools. I'm not sure if you see raise hand feature, annotation, or Q&A, but the key is you have to keep asking. You have to ask your participants to. You have to ask your participants to type in. You can maximize the chat box. So you type in whatever your thoughts. That is more. That is promoting engagement. What's important is what is the keyword in webinar? It's about engagement. So you have to check them from time to time. You can ask them to type yes, to type me, whatever you want to do, but you have to ensure that there is engagement in the entirety. Otherwise, you're gonna bore them to death. I agree. Prasad said response. I couldn't agree more. That is right. Next is capturing registration. What we normally do, I'm happy that there is what we call pre-registration done by the organizers. But what we do is to ask them to type their names in the chat box, and then you have to choose a winning title, and also measuring success and driving greater value. Now, out of the many challenges or problems here, what I want to stress out, especially when you will be facilitating a webinar session, is to ensure there is engagement. Okay. So you can ask them challenging questions, but your question has to be something that is relevant and something that is related to the topic. Okay? All right. So which of these problems do you normally experience when you participate in an online class? Do you experience technical glitches? Do you experience engaging audience? Or have you participated in a session in the past, probably when you've experienced technical glitches, technical haywire, something in relation to the technology? It can be in relation to the internet connection, or it can be in relation to how the facilitator, especially if the facilitator is a baby boomer. You know what a baby boomer is? What's a baby boomer? There's one who said, I have another meeting at 12. When will the session end? We will answer before 12. Middle age, they are the baby boomers. You know what? The baby boomers are those who are born from 1946 to 1964. And they were born during the post World War II baby boom. So if you do your math, they may be around over 50 to 60 years old right now. Yeah, they are what we consider the baby boomers. And the problem with having a facilitator, I don't generalize though, but in a lot of times, a lot of sessions that I've participated with a facilitator who is a baby boomer, he or she may be having challenges specifically with the utilization of the technology. So he may be having challenges in terms of navigating. And the trend now is doing online. We're doing this platform online. And that can take its toll to the baby boomers. Right? So just so you know, there are actually, in terms of the generational division, there is baby boomer. Questions? All right, let's move on. We have around 20 minutes to complete our session. So bear with me as I share with you the engagement metrics. This is just good to know stuff that according to survey done, there is 31% respond to polls. Like for example, when I'm asking you guys, there's only 30 to 31% from the actual participants who would respond. When I ask you to write in our chat box, only 30% would respond to the polls. And then 43% of the registrants view the webinar on demand, 17% download additional content, 7% submit questions, only 7%. So this is good to know stuff. But I'm gonna put emphasis, instead of putting emphasis on the engagement metrics, I'm gonna put emphasis this time. What can we do to increase the webinar engagement, which will be in my next slide. And I'm gonna share with you, when you are facilitating a webinar engagement, you have to be extra sensitive. Okay? What that means is you have to read virtual body language and the cues. I'm seeing you right now while I'm projecting my slides. I'm seeing what you're doing. Some are actually walking, some are doing something else. But as facilitator, you have to be extra sensitive with the language and the cues of your participants. You can use the feedback mechanism provided in the tool, and most virtual classroom products offer yes or no or check buttons, tools for showing a raise hand polls, etc. And note how long it takes participants to provide feedback. You can give a check mark or to answer polls. If you do not get quick responses, that means people may not be paying attention or may not understand the content. So you have to be extra sensitive. Like for example, let's try if everyone is still with me. Type yes if you are still with me. So we have 101 participants. And we'll see if the survey that only 30% would respond is true. So it should be at least 30. But as a facilitator, you have to read virtual body language and cues. You have to look at the quantity of feedback. You have to check if people are engaged in the on-task chat. You have to ensure if participants are raising hands, giving answers, annotating on the whiteboard when asked. Because if not, then they may not be tuning in. They may be doing something else, right? Okay. Number two, in addition to reading virtual body language and cues, you have to call on participants by name. You can, and that's why I always acknowledge, like, I'm seeing Kamal, but just bear with me because I'm having difficulty pronouncing your names. I hope I pronounce it right. Like Senthil Kumar. Senthil Kumar. I'm seeing you from here. Suman Kosh. So just bear with me. I'm just not good at pronouncing Indian names, but I have a lot of Indian friends. All right. So call on participants by name. Let them know ahead of time that you'll be doing this, and you use this strategically so as to encourage dialogue and collaboration and not to discourage participation. Hi, Amarish. I hope I pronounced it right. Suman Gosh. Okay, good. So call on participants by name, all right? So when you will be facilitating a meeting in the future, you know better in terms of pronouncing the names, so you can call them by their first name. Okay? So that's number two. Number three, you have to learn new ways to ask questions. When you say any questions, it doesn't really work well in the virtual classroom as it does in the physical setting. You can say instead that whatever question you may have, you can type it in our chat box, or you can give me a green check mark if you are ready to move on. If you don't get a response you're looking for, there is a good chance participants do not know how to respond. But what I'm trying to say is you have to be as creative as possible in terms of asking questions. But we discourage that you ask questions that are open-ended because it may be eating a lot of time. I mean, not all participants are not really efficient in terms of typing. Not all participants are fast in terms of typing. So in as much as possible, you just ask questions, the questions that are answerable by yes or no, or you can ask them to type shorter words if possible. That is correct. According to Prasad, maybe the question is yes or no. That is correct. A question that is answerable by yes or no. All right? Next, you have to refrain from reading. The trend now in terms of your presentation is, in as much as possible, we just squeeze in and we just include in our PowerPoint presentation some words, but you don't put in everything because I mean, our minds are faster than our mouths. We think faster than we read, right? So in as much as possible, refrain from reading. Don't put everything on one slide. And the trend now is you just use actual pictures in as much as possible. But when you're giving tips, you can use keywords, just like what I'm doing right now in bullet points. But all my talking points, I don't include it. So refrain from reading. Otherwise, you're gonna put your spectators or your learners to boredom if you're just reading your text. Okay? So again, refrain from reading. Next is you have to try not to overemphasize the technology. You know what that means? Try not to overemphasize the technology. What that means is, you know, in a traditional class, you don't say, now I'm going to erase the whiteboard, but you have to be careful of too many references to bandwidth or troubleshooting. And while it's important to acknowledge any technical issues, you have to repeat or repeated apologies and references will emphasize the technology rather than teaching. So instead of putting too much emphasis on the technological challenges, you might want to put emphasis on the learning instead. So again, try not to overemphasize the technology. Can we put your Thanavati? Can we mute? Okay. All right. We still have less than 10. I think we still have 10 minutes. Please bear with me. We're almost done. Are you still with me? Yes? All right. I think we have very attentive participants today. And I give props and kudos to your instructors, to your professors, and to your teachers because they really set a very good role model for everyone. So thank you and kudos to everyone. I think we have very attentive participants for today. So good job. And we are on the process of wrapping up. We are close to wrapping up, so bear with me. So next, I'm going to share with you another tip how you can increase your webinar engagement, and that is to collaborate rather than lecture. Okay? Collaborating rather than lecturing means you work to make participants partners in learning And when you have content that requires excessive lecture, consider other formats for delivery such as podcast or recorded sessions. What I normally do when I'm facilitating a session is to record it ahead of time, and I upload it on my YouTube channel, and then I ask everyone to watch it and stuff like that. So you can do that too. You can create your YouTube channel and then you can prepare ahead of time. Thank you, Amaresh. So you can use YouTube as your life support. That's what I normally do too. I upload when I'm facilitating English. I ask them, okay, let's check English tidbit number one, and I'm providing them the link, and then so they visit my YouTube channel and they watch the video, and then I ask them about their insights, and that's how you do it. Could you explain once again, refrain from reading? Yeah, when you're facilitating a webinar session, in as much as possible, we discourage that you read. What that means is we discourage that you put all your talking points, word per word. We discourage that you put everything in your slide, and all you need to do is to read it. No, we discourage that. What we want you to do is what I'm doing right now. I'm just using the bullet points, and I expound everything. So don't put everything and just read it, because again, as what I've mentioned, it will put our learners to boredom if you do that, because our minds read faster than when we talk. All right, let's move on. Next is you have to use multimedia when it makes sense. I'm going to share with you what we can do later on, what platforms we can use for webinar engagement. And then lastly, you have to limit the audience size. In our conversation with the organizer, we limit it to 100 because it is nearly impossible to achieve any real interaction. Take note, it is impossible to achieve real interaction with 150 people online at once. And most webinar type events are short, so consider offering a session 2 or 3, even 3 times. And that's what I told the organizer, that we can actually open another batch should there be more, but we have to limit it to 100 for this particular session. And what I can do perhaps is to record the session. So I'm recording the session so I can also upload it in my YouTube channel so you can watch it at the convenience of your home. But what I'm trying to say is you have to limit your participants. Otherwise, consider recording the session and making it available on YouTube. So that's why we've limited to 100. For the feedback link, there is a link that is shared in our chat box. All right. Now I'm down to my last slide. I'm just gonna share with you quickly the tools to maximize audience engagement. Let me know if you're familiar with this, okay? Type me if you are familiar with these tools. Number 1, Prezi. Have you seen a Prezi slide? Type no if you're not familiar with it. Oh, okay. It looks like a lot of you are not familiar with Prezi. You know what? I was informed that majority of our learners today are students. Now, I'm challenging you all, and this is my challenge to all the students here. I'm challenging you that when you will be presenting your topic, because you know you will be doing a lot of reportings, right? At school, you will be assigned with a topic. When you will be presenting, please try to use Prezi, and you can search Prezi. Prezi, I mean, there are a lot of templates that we can use. You can search Prezi in Google, and then you can download for free some of the templates. So Prezi is a very powerful tool, and it's very professional to look at. So when you're presenting in front, it's really impressive to look at, especially when you're using Prezi. But Prezi, I mean, I've used it too many times, and you can use it. But majority of you are not really familiar with it. So after the session, you can download Prezi. All right? Next, you can use image usage. As what I've mentioned earlier, instead of using texts, the trend now is to use actual picture. And all you need to do is to elaborate and expound further. So image usage. So refrain also from using clip arts. Clip arts are not effective, and it doesn't look professional at all. So when you're presenting, never ever use clip arts. Next, audience polls. You can use that, or you can, and that's what we're doing. We're engaging everyone by utilizing the chat box. But I found it expensive one. Actually, there are free templates that you can use in Prezi. You can just search it on YouTube. Prezi is spelled Prezi. Next is breakout groups. What this means is you can divide the team into a lot of groups, and this can be an icebreaker, and it can ultimately promote engagement. But due to time constraints, since this is just for an hour, we cannot do it, right? But if it should it be more than an hour discussion, I could have created an activity in relation to breakout groups. No, it's Prezi. I typed it in our chat box, the spelling of Prezi. And lastly, you can use videos or you can grab some videos on YouTube as your live support when you're doing presentation. Okay? All right, so I think those are my tips for everyone. I think we were able to maximize the little time that we have, but let me close the session by inviting everyone to kindly support our community. So our community is getting bigger and bigger. I'm teaching English classes, free English classes online through my YouTube channel, and I've added it in our chat box, the link, so you can also subscribe and see some of the sessions that I facilitated. And in this particular session, I'm also gonna upload it on YouTube, so you can also watch it at the convenience of your home. So all I ask, and I hope it's not too much to ask to my friends, my Indian friends out there, to support our growing community by learning the basic principles and tenets in the English language, because you see, English is fun, and English can be our competitive advantage, right? So I hope that you can help me by subscribing to my YouTube channel. The link is in our chat box. And I want to take this time to thank everyone for attentively listening. You guys rock. You are the best. And thank you very much for having me as your facilitator.